What's going on, people? Mike C-Town here. Happy Metal Monday. So I actually have two albums I want to talk about today, and I'm going to jump right into it because I feel like I have quite a bit to say about both, and I don't want this to run too long. But I actually had to debate on whether or not I would cover this particular record that I'm going to start off with because it's about a month old, and I was like, that might be a little bit too old for me to actually still put a video up about. And then I thought about it, and I'm like, shit, man, it's my channel. Like, I make the rules. Who cares? I do what I want. And I want to talk about this album. So the first album I'm going to talk about is the debut release from the band Misþyrming. And I'm not even going to try to pronounce the title of this album. I'm also not going to try to pronounce the title of these songs because they're in Icelandic. And I'm just going to butcher them all. So I'll just refer to them as track 1, track 2, track 3, whatever. I'll put the actual titles maybe right here so you guys can see what I'm talking about in text. So, Misþyrming is an Icelandic black metal band that I heard when they first dropped their debut release last month. You know, I was getting messages left and right to go listen to this, and I gave it an initial listen, and while I thought it was good, I wasn't floored or anything. You know, to me it sounded just like, you know, more noisy black metal. And no, I really like noisy black metal, like Lurker of Chalice, the Thaw record from last year. You know, I wasn't really like jumping up and down over this release. And after a few more listens, I kind of just put it to the side and forgot about it. Fast forward a few weeks, driving around, I decided to throw it on again, and holy shit, man, it just clicked, you know? I said in my last Metal Monday video that I've been known to not like something off the first maybe 20 listens. And then randomly the album just clicks. And this is a prime example, man. It's one of those albums where I had to stop and say, what the fuck were you thinking to myself? Like, how did I not like this? You know, this album, it has so many of the elements of black metal that I love. You know, the album is super dark. It's pretty ugly. And best of all, it's really well played. You know, the guitars are really heavy. They're muddy as hell, but the riffs are fantastic. You know, the drums are fast and ferocious. The vocals fall somewhere between screamed and growled. You know, they're kind of like a mixture of the singer from Megwa and the guy from Hate Forest. The songs are really well thought out. You know, they don't go for the whole, you know, 4 minutes of tremolo picking thing or dragging out the same riff. You know, there are some nice signature changes on this project, and just, again, just great riff work here, man. It's chaotic, it's gross, it's noisy, it's fucking awesome. The first song starts off blasting you in the face with this great dissonant riff from DG and some killer drum work from HRH. From there on, it really doesn't let up, man. It keeps up this dark, brooding atmosphere throughout the entire release. And while the atmosphere is very consistent over the course of the project, I feel like the songs all have their own identity. You know, and that's something that's not all that common with more modern black metal releases. You know, a lot of the bands seem to find a nice niche sound and just kind of stick to it throughout the whole project. I feel like this album in particular gives you plenty of fast, in-your-face, blast beat-driven riffs, as well as like gloomy, brooding, slower riffs, and they managed to marry the two perfectly. And it's actually during the slow parts that you really start to find yourself, you know, drifting into this record. You know, the riffs used here are really hypnotizing, with the layers of sound going on here. The driving bass-heavy chords. There's even some parts that sound a bit post-punkish, or even like something pulled from noise rock. Maybe something like Sonic Youth may have done, but of course, in this case, played super heavy and dirty as fuck. I also want to make note of the two dark ambient tracks on this album. You know, I love it when quieter passages break up the aggression of metal records, but the passages have to fit in really well with the music and the mood of the album. Otherwise, they seem to be just really out of place or just plain unnecessary. Another issue sometimes is that the same guys writing the metal stuff will want to be the ones to do the ambient passages too, regardless of how good they are at doing them. And this sometimes results in some really amateurish tracks that end up being a solid low point of the album. That's not the case here. The passages here are really well done. They give a nice break to the aggression of the album without detracting from the overall mood and feel of the album. The ambient track, which is track 4, is genuinely haunting. It makes me think of a darker rendition of something like Goblin would have done for the Suspiria soundtrack. You know, I would easily listen to a whole album of these dark ambient tracks that are on here. Whether they're blasting your face off with the first track, or they're giving you a slow ugliness, as with the 5th track, the whole time you feel an air of ugly darkness and terror. You know, this record is truly creepy sounding to me. You know, the way they layered the songs make even the more uplifting sounding riffs, like the one that comes in towards the middle of the 5th track, it still makes them sound ugly and depressing. You know, knowing these guys are from Iceland, when I listen to this album, I just imagine myself sitting in a dark, icy, freezing cold cave, seriously contemplating whether my life is worth continuing. Overall, I think this record is fantastic. It uses influences from international black metal bands that are more known from their area, and even some like Portal-ish, antediluvian style death metal sounds to create a very diverse and very satisfying record. And I'm really glad that I waited a few weeks before I actually decided to talk about this. You know, with me, I think music is all about mood. And the first few times I heard this record, I just don't think I was in the mood for it. You know, whatever was going on in my head at the time was preventing me from really absorbing what these guys were putting out. And, you know, later on, once that preoccupation had faded, luckily for me, I gave this another shot. I totally grasped it, and now I love this album. I can definitely see this being in my top 20 for the end of the year. The next album I want to talk about is by the band Catharsis, and the album is called Samsara. Catharsis was a metal hardcore band from North Carolina, and I first discovered them randomly on a comp that came with an old zine called Inside Front. And it had the song Fall by Catharsis on it, and on first listen, man, I knew this band was something special. You know, I followed their career over the years, grabbing up anything that they dropped, and when they finally released their first official full-length album, Samsara, I have to admit, I was completely blown away. They were known for their live intensity and energy, especially from the singer, Brian Dingledine. And I think Samsara was the first release that really captured that energy in a proper way. You know, this album, it's massive, it's super intense, it's raw, it's passionate. You know, all the things that I loved about hardcore. But what it also was apocalyptic. You know, you really got a dark, the world is ending feel from Samsara. What was different about Catharsis is there was no lip service with them. You know, they weren't just out here screaming about you doing this and doing that just for the sake of being punk rock. You know, Brian really meant it. When he was screaming at you about why you should walk away from the shackles of the workforce and join his army of kids, you know, with the ability to overthrow this corrupt system, you really felt that this was the way. I used to have a sticker that Brian gave me years ago that said on it, when the lights go out, break everything. And that seems like a typical punk mantra, but I'm telling you, Brian actually meant it, man. You know, I had the pleasure of meeting him and kind of sort of becoming friends with him in the 90s. And while being an extremely nice guy, he was also a very, very intense guy. You know, and one of the realest people I've ever met, easily. My band even had the pleasure of sharing the stage with these guys who, you know, of course, blew us out of the fucking water. But yeah, they were a true force in the hardcore scene. What you get with Catharsis is a great mix of Neurosis, Amoebics, His Hero's Gone, Integrity, maybe some Destroy. The thing is, that's only putting it lightly. You know, this record is composed in a way that's so unorthodox with hardcore. It was very dramatic in the way that the songs were laid out and composed. You know, it was almost like orchestral movements in the songs versus your standard, you know, verse, chorus thing that most bands were stuck doing. Catharsis went for something a lot more complex. You know, crazy time changes, really interesting sound shifts. Like the album almost feels like it could be the soundtrack to some crazy movie or play. The way the album starts off with this weird opera-ish lady singing in French before exploding with probably my favorite riff from the whole album is just amazing, and the vocals come in. The sun also rises in hell. If you're not banging your head the entire time this song is on, you are just not into heavy music, man. You may as well go listen to fucking Justin Bieber or something. By the time it gets to Choose Your Heaven, you're hooked on what this album is putting you through. And that's, 30 to 45 minutes or so of anger, frustration, and a variety of other emotions that are meant to focus you into being a pillar of rage pointed at the entire system. This has some of the best riffs from any band in the scene at this time. Lots of crusty, grindy guitar work, crazy pounding from Alexi, who is, in my opinion, one of the best drummers hardcore's ever seen, man. I remember seeing this guy playing so hard and so crazy that he would puke after playing. And the insane vocals from Brian, man. His vocals and lyrics are actually a lot of what attracted me to Catharsis in the first place. And this album has some of my favorite lyrics from just about any band. I feel like you can pick any random song on this album and pull some amazing lines from it. But some of my favorites I'll give you. From Choose Your Heaven. We're corpses in their loving hands, sleepwalking through a never, never land, and when we wake from dreams, there'll be nothing fucking left. Are you comfortable in your cage, living out your very numbered days? Don't settle for nothing, choose your heaven. From Every Man for Himself, crawling through our darkest hours, slow funeral march to the end. We've been led astray once again, but I will serve no gods or masters. My kingdom come, my will be done, in heaven as it is down here. Lastly, from the song Pariah, which is probably one of my favorite hardcore songs of all time. The way it ends gives me goosebumps every single time I hear it, and that is seriously no exaggeration. If there was any song I'd say to go listen to get a feel for Catharsis, it'd be this one. But the way it ends with these lines: the hopeless will have hope tonight, the worthless will have worth tonight, the weary will rest well tonight, the holy sleep in hell tonight, the first will be the last tonight, the last will be the first tonight, the mighty are brought low tonight, the have-nots will get ours tonight. It's easily one of the most powerful songs for me from this band, and probably from the whole scene itself. It represented to be what hardcore was about. Rebellion, the reversal of power, the underdog taking what he's worked for all his life, which is true freedom. And, Catharsis says this in the most fucking badass way possible. I've talked about some of my favorite hardcore albums on my channel before, and this one, along with albums like Integrity, Those Who Fear Tomorrow, and Unbroken's Life, Love, Regret, they're up there, man. And sometimes those three records swap out my #1 spot depending on my mood. But the past few weeks, this record's been my #1, Samsara. The impeccable and extremely interesting guitar playing on it, the poetic lyrics combined with the aggressive vocals, the untouchable drumming, it all adds up to one just incredible ride, man. And I can go on record as saying no other band sounded like Catharsis, and I don't think any new band will be able to match the ferocity and the power of Catharsis. I hope to be proven wrong, but I haven't heard anything touching this album yet. Real quick, rest in peace Dan Young, otherwise known as Live Fast Dan Young, who was the guitar player for Catharsis, who unfortunately passed away shortly after Samsara was released. So that's it for this edition of Metal Monday. Hope you enjoyed it. Please leave some comments. If you feel like it, throw some shit in there that you think I might need to talk about in my next one. Alright? As usual, thank you for living, thank you for loving, thank you for being you, and I will see you guys next time. Alright? Peace, bitch.